So when it comes to interfaces today, there's a lot to choose from. The quality of interfaces has grown tremendously over the last 10 years. We have seen leaps and bounds in conversion over my time doing this. I go back 30 years of doing this digitally, 40 years recording. There are a lot of great recording interfaces out there for us to choose from for our project studios. So deciding which one can be very complicated because there's so many great choices. We have come so far ahead over the last 10 years in conversion quality to where, for the most part, the differences between mid-level and high-end are not as far as they used to be. There still is a distinction, but it's nowhere near at the level that it was 15, 20 years ago for obvious reasons. So now you're faced with having to make a decision what recording interface to buy and which one am I going to upgrade to next, depending on what your first recording interface was. Maybe you've got one that's kind of 10, 12, 13, 14, 15 years old. Because if you're like me, when you buy a recording interface, for me, the smart thing to do is buy one that you're going to use for at least 10 years. Now, I've always been able to do this, at least for the last 20 years of doing this, because I learned in my first 10 years, quit skimping, save a little bit more money, and go to that next level right away so you can get more mileage out of it. So when trying to decide which manufacturer do I buy from, what are you going to do? Are you just going to spin the wheel and hope that you get it right? Or are you going to go on the cesspool of opinions called the internet forum, where you're not likely to ever get a truly unbiased feedback on anything, quite honestly? All right, so Barry, just get to it, man. What is it you recommend? Well, I think the things to consider ultimately when trying to decide, first and foremost, which is the most solid performing, the most reliable interface for the operating system that you use. Which one has been known to make the very best drivers, where you see very few of that manufacturer's products for sale on Reverb? It's actually quite hard to find that manufacturer because that tells you something, that they're so good no one is getting rid of them. So stability is incredibly important. Rock solid drivers, incredibly important. That is an area where far too many struggle, especially when an operating system update happens, or ultimately they're still learning and they're not sure what to do, or they bought a cheap interface with terrible drivers, whatever it may be, but you want solid drivers, right? Next thing, you've got to make sure it's got the right amount of I/O, not for you today, but where you see yourself being in 5 years. That's the way you want to look at it, because you don't want your need for additional analog I/O or digital I/O to grow, requiring you to have to replace that interface. Try to get an interface that you can build upon later on to give yourself more options, even if you're not quite sure you're going to need it. Odds are at some point you're probably going to incorporate some hardware, analog hardware, into your workflow as hardware inserts. Not all of you, but certainly a lot of us out there recording at home do that. So you've got to think about your I/O that you're going to need for that. Next up, mic pre's are relatively important. It all depends on whether or not you've either already invested in outboard mic preamps or you plan to relatively soon. If you want to operate with just the mic preamps of your interface, then that becomes important, and you want to get a quality mic input, one that has a lot of headroom, that can take a lot of input gain, and certainly uses high-end, high-quality XLR connectors, XLR and balanced 1/4 inch. You really want to make sure, because if you're going to use it for 10 years, that's a lot of mic cables and patch cables being plugged in and unplugged from it. So the quality of those jacks is super important. Digital I/O is super important, mainly for growing down the road or expanding your system. You've got options like MADI, Dante, ADAT, SPDIF, AES. Depending on your needs, make sure you get an interface that will suit your needs. As an example, there are a lot of recording interfaces out there in that mid-level to lower end price point that only give you 8 channels of additional I/O via ADAT. So if you need to grow your system And if you only have 2 I/O on your existing interface as it is, and then you add ADAT I/O, you're only going to be able to get up to 10 analog I/O. Now that very well may be enough for what you're doing. That's certainly enough to get by recording a set of drum. That's certainly enough to get by recording drums. I would use a little bit more, but I could certainly get it done with that many tracks on drums. And then ultimately, if you really wanted to track a whole band, you couldn't do that, requiring you to sell that interface. You get where I'm going? All right, now we've got that out of the way. Build quality, of course, is important. You want something that's going to hold up, although for most people, recording interfaces, once you rack it, you're not really moving it that often. That's why the input jacks and the headphone jacks and all that matter so much. And then lastly, the conversion. You want to get the best conversion you can get for the money. So who ticks all of these boxes? Ask yourself that. Who ticks all of these boxes and who gets an 8, 9, or 10 score on all of those boxes? Do you have a consideration that you're considering that nails some of them, but maybe 1 or 2 not so well? Well, that should tell you something. It's where to invest your money. And having owned so many different interfaces by different manufacturers, and I'll kind of go through them real quick. I've owned interfaces by Motu. I've owned interfaces by RME, a couple over the years. I've owned, Digidesign 192s, Digidesign HDOs, Digidesign Omni, Apogee Centered, Apogee ADDA16. What else? Lynx Aurora 16. I know there's others out there. And a handful of others I've completely forgotten about. And so I've experienced some good, some bad, and some, don't forget Metric Halo. Had that interface for a while. Really great interface. So ultimately having owned and used very extensively a lot of different interfaces over the years of varying degrees of quality, ultimately you can tell that I did need to upgrade along the way. Now, some of those were adding to it and building up the number of I/O in a system, not necessarily an upgrade, but just an expansion. But that gives me, I think, a lot to really evaluate and consider. And for me, there's only one company out there that has nailed all of them, and that is RME. That is RME. When you're talking about for the price point, in other words, if you're just measuring conversion alone, the Lynx Aurora LN is better than RME UFX3. It is better. You're going to get Burl and things like that. They are better. Prism, they are better. Apogee Symphony, marginally better, but better. Okay. The others around that, I don't think so. Not from my experience. Ultimately, I think RME ticks every one of those boxes where none of the other manufacturers do. Even the ones that I just mentioned that are high-end don't tick all the boxes because you don't have all of the I/O you're looking for. You have some of it. You don't have any existing mic preamps. And to get into that line, you have to jump into a much more expensive price point. Where is that plateau, I guess I'm talking about, to where you can get the best bang for your buck without needing to spend more to get something just a little bit better? For me, that's the RME, and today that would be the UFX3. That's what I would buy if I were you, or the Babyface Pro. Now, RME, the Babyface Pro, is the least expensive in their interfaces, so they're not an entry-level company. This is a company that you build up to, but when you're ready for that, I strongly suggest that you do that. Now, understand, RME has no knowledge. They have no clue I'm even making this video. This is not sponsored by anybody. So this is just my opinion and my thoughts on the subject, mainly inspired by a lot of comments that I've received lately in other videos that I've gotten, just really talking about some interface challenges in general. So I thought I would share this again with all of you today. Do me a favor, if you decide to buy a recording interface, I do supplement the income for this channel with an affiliate link to Sweetwater. They're not paying to sponsor this video. However, I do get a small cut of anything that you buy using that link down in the description below. Copy that link over to your browser, put anything in your cart from a set of strings to that $10,000 whatever, and I will get a small percentage of it. That's how you can help me out because you don't make any money off views. So do me a favor, leave some comments down below. Tell me what your opinion is. Tell me if you disagree with me. Just do it respectfully. You don't got to be a jerk about it. But, kind of put that down below and let's just kind of chat through it. Remember, this is one guy's opinion. This is not de facto fact. You know what I'm saying, Jayan? Hey, is that a new thing? No, old people like me don't come up with new things. But anyway, until next time, have yourself a great day. Bye-bye.